Come, come, whoever you are welcome here. No matter your age, your size, the color of your eyes, your hair, your skin, you are welcome here. No matter your gender, whom you love, how you speak, or whatever your abilities, you are welcome here. You are welcome here whether you come with laughter in your heart or tears. You are welcome here. No matter what you've experienced in the past, no matter what awaits in the future, you are welcome here, now. Whether you believe in God all of the time, some of the time, or none of the time, you are welcome here. This is a community of open minds, loving hearts, and willing hands. And good morning. Okay, let's wake up together. Good morning. I'm Brenda Boisard. I'm the worship coordinator for today, and my pronouns are she and her. I'm a tall, white lesbian with blondish gray hair, and I welcome you to another installment of Summer of Soul, as today we consider the public institutions of museums and how they feed our spirits. July has been Utah Museum Month. Did you guys know that? Anybody been to a museum in July? Yes, a few. There's still time. Okay. And we're going to celebrate those today. I have a wonderful guest speaker, Becky Menlove, who I'll introduce more in a little bit, to talk to us about her calling in museums. Next week, the August worship services are in Murray Park, and then for all of August. Okay, so don't come here. Go to Murray Park Pavilion 2. We moved to the park in the summer during the pandemic, and we've enjoyed the experience of worshiping there, and so each summer we continue to spend time there. And it's good to be and remember that place where we felt safe to gather once again some years ago. So please head to Murray Park for the next month. And now let's take a moment to share the warmth of community, say hello, welcome one another, get up, walk around, say good morning. And now let us sing together.
All right. Good morning. We are going to be singing 139 hymnal. The words will also be up here as well. Wonders still the world shall witness. If you'd like to stand, if you are willing and able, you may do so.
Wonders please stay standing for our chalice lighting, and Tasha and Henry will be lighting our chalice. Let us say our words together. We light this chalice for the warmth of love, for the light of truth, and for the energy of action. Thank you, you guys. You may be seated. And the kiddos and those young at heart can come up for a story time. And there's some cushions in there. Yeah, you guys got it. Okay. Welcome, you guys. So today we're talking about museums and all the things we find in museums. Who's been to a museum?
Me.
Yes? What kind? What?
Dinosaur.
Dinosaur museum?
I've been to a dinosaur one.
Dinosaur museum? Okay, guess what our thing is today? Dinosaurs! Okay. Anybody been to an art museum? Yeah? Yeah? Few? Okay. So I have a piece of art on the altar from my friend Travis. He painted that. Can you guys all see that? I don't know if you can, from way over there. But what do you see in the painting?
And vegetables and tomatoes.
Vegetables, tomatoes. What else?
A squash.
A squash. Isaac?
Thing underneath most of the fruit.
There's a wooden thing under the fruit.
A nice meal.
A nice meal is what you see. Nice, I like that. Okay, so you took the next step because we look at something and we see what's actually there, right? And then we start to use our imaginations, yeah? So after Travis painted this, do you think he had a nice meal with what's in the painting? Yeah, he probably did. What happened before this? What's that? Did he eat the painting? I mean, he ate the food, right? So he kind of ate the painting, yeah. What about before the painting? What were these things doing? Yeah?
He got inspired.
He got inspired before the painting. Love that. That is correct. So correct. What else about these things? What were they doing before they were in a painting? Growing?
Yeah. Growing.
They were growing in a garden. Yeah. So then he got inspired. And what does that mean?
He got an idea.
He got an idea. Awesome. Okay. Do you guys get ideas? A lot of ideas? Yeah. Okay. So this is the kind of thing that we're talking about today. Like, what are those ideas? Where do they come from? Who do we have? Whose ideas are in museums? What matters to us? Why do we have museums? All those things we're going to talk about. And this is Iamosaurus. Has anyone known this book? Isaac knows this book. Okay. These guys, and I have a paper. These guys are going to a museum to see what you guys saw. Dinosaurs. Okay. And so, here we start. Iamosaurus. I am a noodlevorous, one of the genus Ridiculorus. Mothers abhor us, babies adore us. We romp, we stomp. Can you stomp? Thank you. And we chomp on the florus. Okay, now, this part I'm not so good. Where are these things? We have maxillae. Maxillae? Where do maxillae in our bodies? Okay. We have mandibles. So do dinosaurs, by the way. Ribs. Anybody know where ribs are? Ribs? Okay. Yeah. Okay. We're explorers, outdoors. We travel in herds. Don't try to catch us, we'll fly off like birds. We've got biceps. Where's biceps? Anybody know biceps? Yeah. We've got triceps. Where's tricep? Yeah, yeah, yeah. And a bronchial tree. Did you know you had a tree inside you? Where's bronchial tree? Yeah. Yeah. We're stronger than elephants, faster than bats. Our footprints strike terror in uncles and aunts. We've got corneas. Yeah? We've got cochlea. Here. Yeah? So we see you, we hear you, but we don't understand. Our language consists of grunts. Anybody can grunt? And demands. Very good grunts, very good grunts. We're performers. I'm one ahead. We're performers, transformers. We hang upside down. If you don't feed us soon, we'll devour the town. You can join us. You've got your own loud vocal cords. We're a chorus. Let's roar us. Let's roar us. Yes! And then, besides roaring, let's stomp and roar again. Okay, I'm convinced we are a saurus. Dinosaurs, all of you, as well as humans.
I love T-Rexes.
You love T-Rexes, yes.
They're my favorite.
Okay, I love that you love them. Yes. Okay, thanks guys. You have wonderful things to do today in the downstairs, and I think Court is gonna take you down. And then if there's folks that want to have your kids in nursery, we have that too today. So let's sing them out. This community, our church, and its many ministries are only made possible by the gifts you give of your time, your talent, and your treasure. Many of us pledge monthly to support the work of this church, and for this we're grateful. The gifts ensure we're able to live our values of love and justice in the world. And part of our ministry is sharing what we take as an offering each Sunday. And this month, the offertory split partner is the Utah Food Bank Kids Cafe. And the Utah Food Bank Kids Cafe program during the summer is providing free meals to children 18 and younger with weekly meal kits, which is 7 breakfasts and 7 lunch. And this program in school time offers after-school meals. And it was chosen by our youth and children to be our offering split recipient for this month and next. And so please join me in reading our offertory words. They're printed above. We are this church. We are its hands, its heart, its voice. Together we share the wealth of this community and sustain it with our gifts. And we'll now accept the offering at this time. And we will be singing while we do the offertory.
All right, please join us for 346. Come sing a song with me.
Come sing a song with me. And for all we have received and all we have found the courage to give, may we be truly thankful. And may these gifts be a blessing to South Valley and to the Utah Food Bank Kids Cafe. The first museum I really fell for was the Art Institute of Chicago. I couldn't leave once I went in. I'd been to history museums in Washington, D.C., and fascinated by what I learned there. But when I was in college and I went to the Art Institute, my spirit soared. I didn't have a lot of words of why and what was happening then or now, really. But I kind of knew there was a wide world, been around for a long time, and humans had many experiences beyond what I had, but also resonating with what I had experienced. I've talked to a lot of folks who've had profound experiences in museums, feeling like they weren't alone once they saw something expressed that their inner world was accurately portrayed outwardly by an artist's work. National parks can do this too. When I first saw ruins from the Puebloan ancestral peoples in the Four Corners area, and I was told that the particular stones that were used to make the kivas and the dwellings came from the plateau way above, and that they had chosen to do the work to bring those particular stones to their space to make these spaces, these holy spaces, these dwelling spaces. And I thought, humans we've always cared about beauty and art, and we've done it in whatever way we had accessible to us, and it matters. It matters. Our seventh principle is respect the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. So if you think of, isn't this what museums are helping us do? All existence, the natural history of the world, all of it. And the Natural History Museum of Utah is a treasure. Who's been? Oh, yeah. So we have here today with us Becky Menlove, and she helped create that treasure. Okay. And a number of other museums in her career. So I had the pleasure of taking a class from Becky at the U, a kind of behind-the-scenes look at what goes on to create exhibits and education and museums themselves. And I was struck that this is really a calling for you, and that your passion and excitement come through loud and clear. And she's very concerned about museum inclusivity. And so when I read that this month was Utah Museum Month, I thought of Becky immediately, and I thought I'd love for you guys to be able to hear her speak. And she said yes. And so I'm really glad. There are some slides in there as while she's speaking. And I just, current title is Deputy Director Emeritus at the Natural History Museum of Utah. And thank you for being with us here.
My great pleasure. This is my first time to a Unitarian Universalist service, and it's blowing my mind, so I might return. I really love it, and I'm so grateful for the invitation from Brenda. I was really scared, but I said yes. I often say yes when I shouldn't. Today I feel like I said yes when I should. And I never thought of my work as a calling. I think of it as my life's work, my passion. I came to it in a kind of a strange and roundabout way. But now I've worked in museums for over 36 years. One twice. The Natural History Museum I worked at in the 80s, and again when I came back in 2000. And I'm just a museum nerd. I started my museum, well, I guess many of you started your interest in museums as children, going on field trips or with your families. I lived 1 block away from the University of Utah when I was about 10, and I would walk up to campus, and there was one of those old army buildings that had an apatosaurus in it and a curtain you went behind to see fluorescent lights, and you could buy minerals at the front table, and I created a collection, which we'll talk more about in a minute. So I was sold right out of the chute. Also, I don't know if you know this, but the Park building on President's Circle used to be, the 4th floor was the University Art Museum. So I would go up there and just gaze at the art and be blown away by it. When they built their new building, I immediately went to look for my favorite works from my childhood. I also used to slide down the railings, but we don't need to talk too much about that. When you think about museums, you might think of all kinds of places. There are many, many different kinds of museums. Maybe you think of grand art museums like the Louvre, or perhaps exotic dioramas like you would see at the American Museum of Natural History or the Chicago Field Institute, Chicago Field Museum Art Institute. They're very close together. Yeah. Maybe you think about hands-on science centers like the Exploratorium or children's museums that are so important to folks, or giant history museums like the British Museum. There was recently a meme that said that the British Museum has nothing British inside. So it's kind of true. Maybe you think about small town collections of local histories like the Daughters of the Pioneer museums throughout Utah. And in a recent study about the value of museums to people, they said that they went to museums just because they want to feel good, just like you talked about. Sometimes they said they went because they're inspiring, and I love that when we heard that about inspiration in this artwork. Sometimes they go because they are very trusted institutions in a time when there's not a lot of trust in the world. Sometimes people feel like museums make them smarter. Sometimes they feel like they're community centers, and certainly that's something museum people strive for. And because they can be important partners in the community, and they invite you to learn. So these are some of the reasons that people visit museums, also because there's air conditioning in the summer. Each museum has a story to tell about itself. This is slide number 2, about its contents, about the cultures that produced it, and the cultures and the communities that the museum represents. And then there are the social structures, politics, and ways of thinking that brought museums into being. These are all part of the stories that museums tell. And like I still call it my Museum of Natural History. I worked there for 20 years this last time. Museums across the country and around the world are housed in iconic buildings. So these buildings sometimes are just beautiful examples. Sometimes they represent what's found inside, and they stand as icons in the community. You know, a lot of times people will have visitors from out of town and they say, you got to come see our museum, no matter what city you're in, right? So these are just a few of my favorites. The Burke Museum's fairly new in Seattle. Just went there last year, and it's fabulous and an interesting museum. I've always loved the Natural History Museum in London. It's like a giant castle in the city. The National Museum of the American Indian, has anyone been there in Washington, D.C.? It's a really great building and a great collection. And the California Academy of Sciences, we call it just Cal Academy, and has a nice living roof. They achieved a LEED Platinum status because it's such a green building. So a lot of times museums are making a statement as much with their building as with what's inside, and usually those two things coexist. At the Natural History Museum, the building introduces this giant collection side on one side, and then a big wall of objects, and many of you seen that 3-story wall of objects, and then those objects travel out into the rest of the museum from where they came. So there's this thinking behind making these buildings as well as what goes inside. So we'll go on to the next one. So collections are at the heart of museums. There's a lot of discussion about, is it a museum if there's no collection these days, so we won't go into that. I still think of museums as places that has collections. And modern museums of today were created for public engagement and education, and they have their roots in the museums of the 18th and 19th century in Europe. So these are filled with objects that inspire, surprise, delight, but also in many cases they're infused with nationalism, power, colonial expansion. We'll come back to this in a few minutes. We'll stay on the happy side for a minute here. It's interesting to understand that before public museums, collecting and display together were activities of individuals. Are you all collectors yourselves? Yeah? I know, some of us collect too much, I have to say, in my case. And while private collections have long provided the basis of later museum collections, many people take their wonderful collections and donate them to museums. In the early days, they were collections that were amassed by royalty, wealthy merchants, scholars, and the clergy, and sometimes they were displayed, crammed into cupboards, and sometimes stuffed with rare objects, or there were entire rooms filled with interesting and exotic and surprising objects. They were referred to as cabinets of curiosity or Wunderkammer, rooms of wonder. So you can see they were artistically displayed. Oh, go back, sorry, not yet. You can see they were artistically displayed. They were meant to be beautiful to look at. And then an interesting thing happened. People started to paint paintings that made a record, an art record of the art of collecting. So these all came together as something for people to look at. I think it's interesting, too, that they were meant to evoke wonder and beauty and to encapsulate all of God's handiwork. So ultimately, many of these collections made their way into private homes, into museum collections from private homes. Now you can go to the next one. By the late 19th century, museums of all types were well established and growing, and in this generation of public museums, the primary goals were collection, classification, so trying to really sort out what's going on in the world of art and of science and of nature, research, conservation, and professional training. I'll just point out that's me in the lower center in my first museum job at the Natural History Museum studying textiles. I look just the same, I know. By the late 19th century, you can go on, museums were, oh, I said that already. So that was me as a textile analyst. Oh, sorry, I went forward too fast. You can go back. Here's the cool thing. I got my start being a textile analyst at the Natural History Museum, and I got to analyze the ancient sandals of ancestral Puebloan people. So I came into this work as a professional weaver, and so I knew about how things are interlaced. And so then there I was in the back room of the museum studying the interlacement of these sandals, looking through microscopes at the plant material that was used, and it was an awesome 8-year experience. Today, all these other new technologies are coming along and have come along over the last 100 years or so. And so these same collections in museums all over the world continue to be really important libraries of further study. So things that we didn't know about before, we can go back to those same collections and study more. So that means that they can provide insights to change in climate and biodiversity. Museums are studying the DNA of plants and animals and understanding the evolution of those systems better. We're using X-rays and CT scans to look more closely inside of objects, which is very cool. Also ancient artifacts. We once looked into an Egyptian copse that had the body of an ibis inside, and inside the ibis were all sorts of additional objects. We wouldn't have known that because we certainly weren't going to take it all apart. So looking at a CT scan of that object is like, whoa, pretty amazing. Also, techniques are now in place, including X-rays and CT scans to help conserve art objects and ancient artifacts of all kinds. And so this helps us understand not only how ancient objects were made. If we were looking at those sandals again now, which I'm not, using some of these new techniques, we can now start to understand not only how they were made, but how they were used. So there's been recent research at the Natural History Museum looking at the starches ingrained in pottery bowls from 3,000 years ago that help us understand when potatoes came to North America, which was much earlier than anyone thought. We also did an exhibit quite some time ago about chocolate, and we were able to see chocolate embedded in objects from Utah. Hello, we've always had a problem with chocolate. Anyhow, now you can go on to the next slide. By the 20th century, the primary focus of museums started to expand to include all of you. So public education as the key aim. They used to be very much, museums were either early on for the elite, And then they were for scientists and art historians. And by the 20th century, everyone was really focusing on, we can use these spaces to educate and to inspire. And so now, understanding of science and art and history, educational experiences for all ages is what's at the heart of museum practice. And I'm going to talk a lot about museum practice now because I have to say it's a community of professionals that are amazing to work with. So beyond the docent-led field trips that you might have experienced the first time you went to a museum, guided tours, there's also art class. Think of all the things you can do at museums locally. Art classes, field experiences, scientist-led, artist-led demonstrations, interactive and touch exhibits, teacher training, curriculum development, camps, community gatherings, lectures, and it's a long list. There's so much that you can do at museums today. These are just some activities from the Natural History Museum. So here we are now. Oh, I should also add that this is a sector that employs hundreds of thousands of individuals. There's so many jobs that are needed to be done now in museums that the range is huge. Pretty much anybody can now find some reason to work in a museum. Your training will take you there. So now here we are in the 21st century. And when I came back to the Natural History Museum of Utah in 2000, just like others in the field, my museum was starting to say, okay, what are we going to do about diversity? So we were being very successful bringing in large groups of children from many walks of life. We were offering all sorts of programs that brought broader audiences in that way to the museum. But the general public, just like everywhere else, was pretty much more highly educated, more affluent, had easy access with cars and so on, and that's who was still coming to the museum. And so a big push really started at this time across the nation in saying, okay, how are we going to stop being so elite and making these places for all? And there's still a lot of work to do, let me just say, for all of us, especially we're kind of up against it now. So I'm lucky because I've been involved for many years, maybe 8 years, in a program that's a national program that started in Minneapolis, and they were aiming to work with schools to try to improve diversity, inclusion, access, and what's the other one? Equity, and DEAI, which we're not allowed to say anymore. And so that program was a training program for teachers and administrators. And the museum, Minnesota Science Museum, decided, boy, if we started reaching out to informal science institutions, natural history science museums, we could reach so many more teachers, because all of us are reaching out to teachers. So they started this institute where we go twice a year. I'm still going, and I've been retired for 4 years. And so, because I'm a veteran, they call us first cohort, the veterans. We come in to act like we know what we're talking about. And so this is just one of many projects that have popped up around the country to support DEAI in museums. And I feel very proud about the work that museums have done in this area. And strangely enough, COVID gave us an extra boost in this direction because we were forced to provide things online as well as in person. And then instantly we were creating videos and online teaching segments and so on that reached even broader audiences. And as we've brought people back, we continue to try to work in this way. So the goal obviously is to move the needle on welcoming and making accessible spaces for everyone. Also, that would make social impact possible. And to my great relief, despite all the work to push back DEAI across the country, this work is continuing all over the place. I'm going to Minnesota again in October. So the ideals that are embedded in DEAI are rooted in these social impacts, and they've been defined as the effect of an activity or activities on the social fabric of a community, the well-being of individuals and families who live there. Work is underway to both study and develop paths to social impact through continued learning and engagement. And strengthening relates too much singing, guys. strengthening relationships, focusing on health and well-being as well. Right now, there's a whole new program that's running across museums throughout the country called Mental Health for All. So it turns out, just as you said, Brenda, when you go to a museum, for many people, there's a feeling of calm or of amazement or happiness. And so this is a place where you can really serve your own mental health. And so studies are underway and so on. Oh, thanks, that's very kind. So, am I taking too long? No, I'm okay. I warned Brenda, I do ramble. There's one new trend going on that's called Museums for All. It welcomes families across the nation, free or reduced admission, so up to $3 for a family. They show their SNAP benefits cards, and in they come. And at this point, there are 1,300 museums across the nation who are participating, and there are, since launching, there have been 9 million visitors served through this program. So the idea is that sometimes when we think about access, it's about getting there. Once you're in the building, it's about being able to access the experience, and it's also about cost in many cases. So there are many programs underway. And as museums want to continue making these impacts and wish to share the celebration of culture, lift spirits, and provide inspiration for us all, they must truly become this kind of welcoming space. I've always said that museum visitors kind of come looking for themselves in the experience. Think about it. If you come to the Museum of Natural History, you might look around and say, oh, that's where I always go hiking. Oh, this is a story about my ancestors. Oh, this is about the geology of where I like to hike. So as you're moving around, it becomes more resonant for you when you can link your own life story. Well, imagine what happens if the story doesn't resonate with you, or if it's a story about your ancestors that's not the real story that you've been told your entire life. So these are some of the challenges that we're facing. For a visit to be resonant and memorable, they must be authentic stories. And they must be accessible. And they must reflect the lived experiences of our visitors, especially about those about whom the stories are being told. So there's a phrase about this, you've probably heard it. It's called "not about us without us." Now, we don't tell stories. We shouldn't tell stories about others unless we're bringing those others into the conversation. So again, another, I would say, relatively recent development is co-curation. We've been long engaging with other communities at the Natural History Museum. And I have to say that museum's, in many ways, kind of an easy one in this area because we're mostly working with dinosaurs and plants. I don't have to do a lot of consulting about that except with scientists. But we also have a really wonderful American Indian collection. And lucky for us, the Natural History Museum, thinking way ahead, back in 1986 created what was called the Indian Advisory Committee. I wonder which slide I'm supposed to be on. Well, good job. Thanks, Maureen. Oh dear. And so this advisory committee, some of the people are still on it from back then, well, one of the women that was on this committee. This committee is made up of tribal representatives who then assign someone from the community to come. There are members at large from the urban Indian community and members from the educational community. So we've been working with them since 1986. It's an important and really valuable resource, and we couldn't do the work that we do without consulting with the Indigenous people whose stories we're telling in our galleries. I had the same experience when I was working at the Plains Indian Museum in Cody, Wyoming. I was there for the reinstallation of that wonderful museum, and they also had a really powerful and wonderful Indian Advisory Committee with whom we got to work. And then they would assign us to speak with individuals within their communities who had been assigned to represent. I always say, you know, if I were assigned to represent the white girls in Utah, I don't think I'd be covering all the bases. So it's really important that we first hear from who is it that has been assigned to be that person who represents by the community leaders, and then to continue to consult. It's not a one-time project. In 1990, the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act came into being. This is this next one. There it is. And so this is, it mandates protection for burial sites, prohibition of the sale of display of human remains, funerary objects, sacred objects, and objects of cultural matrimony. And so at that time, all the American museums were required to create inventories of collection objects to share with tribes throughout the nation and repatriate those objects where appropriate. Last year, in 2023, NAGPRO was updated, and you may have read about various places or even visited museums where suddenly the objects in the Native American galleries were covered. This is because the rules became stronger, and not everybody had complied through the years. The American Museum of Natural History had Native American galleries that were 50 or more years old, not at all how we should be displaying American Indian stories. And so we were lucky because NHMU is totally in compliance. We didn't have to cover or remove anything, but it didn't stop the work. They're currently working on another project that's underway. And, oh, this is consulting with Native people up here, this slide. So they continue to check in, even on an exhibit that was once made and approved. They're talking about a new version of it, and once again, plenty of consultation going on. So this brings our focus back to collecting. And when I think about collections in natural history, this is kind of what it looks like. When I say you could compare one thing to another, let me tell you, there's plenty to compare to see how things have changed over time. There are many ways that objects come into museums, and museums have played a very deep and often difficult and contested history in the amassing of collections. Sometimes they come as bequests from private collections. That's nice. Sometimes they come through colonial or missionary activity. There was a long tradition in North America of missionaries going into Native American communities and telling them to throw down their bundles was the term. A bundle is a container of sacred objects. They would throw down their bundles, go into the river to be baptized, and the bundles would be stolen and taken to museums. So it's kind of a troubling history, right? Sorry, I just got sidetracked there. Sometimes collections come through conflict. So if you think of the spoils of war, another terrible way for objects to come into museum collections. And of course, there are expeditions and excavations that go on. This is how much of the material found in natural history museums comes. Scientists are out there doing their work. They bring the stuff back, they store it, and they continue to collect it. And then there are objects nowadays that are purchased as commissions, and this is how the Natural History Museum is obtaining new indigenous art for their collection. And then there is theft in the black market, which is a continuing problem. Some museums are still purchasing objects that they think are okay, and then they're not. I'm sure you all read about some of these issues with the Benin bronzes is one important one, and many other stories, especially in the big European museums where objects are being returned or the demand for the objects is in place, and it can be tricky. So you can go to the next one. So not only are museums dealing with these complex issues related to repatriating art and other objects, but some are also embracing the need to tell difficult stories that are part of our shared history. So I put up a couple of slides that I like here. When I think about hard stories in museums, I think of museums I've visited that tell hard stories, like the 9/11 Museum. I went through that in New York and couldn't stop crying. The Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. And then when we reopened the Plains Indian Museum in Cody, some visitors came up to me and said, "Ooh, I don't want to hear the sad stories." When in reality, what we were up to were telling celebratory stories from the voices of the native people of the region. So making restitution, reparation, repatriation, it's not simple. Sometimes it's surrounded by ethical, moral, and legal issues. There can even be ambivalence on the part of the source communities. We don't know where to put this stuff, for example. But desire among museum practitioners and governments to confront and correct these historical injustices hasn't ever been stronger, I would say. And so we're seeing this both in the return of objects to their communities and how objects are displayed and the stories they may tell. And I'll just briefly say, on the left, Mining the Museum is a fairly old exhibition made by a fellow named, an artist named Fred Wilson. It's called Metalwork. It was shown in Maryland, and you can see that what's juxtaposed here, in juxtaposition, what do you put next to the other thing to tell the story, is beautiful silverware from the colonial arrivals in the area, and slave shackles who helped them amass those beautiful collections of things. So this was a confronting kind of exhibit, and this is the case in many exhibits. They're pretty powerful. One of my favorites was the Americans at the National Museum of the American Indian. That makes us confront some of the myths that we think about among American Indians. Very powerful, and you can see parts of these things online, I'll just say. So anyway, I believe that at the heart of museum work today is the desire to inspire us, to expand our experiences and broaden our understanding, and help to create a better world. This is sort of what it feels like. We often talk about the greater good, and that's what I feel like we're up to. In large part because we are willing to engage and redress past wrongs, and we strive to offer places where people can gather and celebrate each other and reflect on our world in all of its glories and all of its complexities. So this last one, museums are for you. They're for all of us. These are places that are meant to be where you can go to find whatever experience you want to find. You can find yourself in most of them. They're everywhere. And here in Utah, there are more than 264 museums. That's a lot, right? You could take a really great road trip and visit all of those museums. There are thousands of museums worldwide, so I hope you'll all visit one soon.
So wonderful. Thank you, Becky. Wow. I'm inspired. I want to go to a museum today. Yeah. So let's sing together. We're going to stand and sing together, and then we're going to exchange the chalice, and we're out of here. Oh, come you longing, thirsty souls, number 209.
Feel free to stand if you are willing and able and desire to do so.
Was
extinguish our chalice with our words. We extinguish this chalice, but not the warmth of love, the light of truth, nor the energy of action. We hold each other in our hearts until we meet again. Thank you, everyone.